Thanks for tuning in to As the Tire Turns podcast. Before we dive into this week's episode, I'd like to thank our sponsor, AME International. Tire professionals insist on AME. I'd also like to recognize the AACF. For over 65 years, the Automotive Aftermarket Charitable Foundation has stood by those in the automotive aftermarket industry and their families during life's toughest challenges. Since 1959, with the incredible support of industry partners, AACF has provided vital assistance to individuals and families facing financial hardship due to unforeseen circumstances, such as floods, earthquakes, storms, fires, catastrophic medical conditions, life-changing accidents, devastating fatalities, and more. AACF offers a straightforward application process and a quick turnaround time for those needing support during critical moments. Visit www.aftermarketcharity.org to access the application and learn more about how AACF can assist during times of need. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of our automotive aftermarket family. Support AACF today. And now, As the Tire Turns. We're back for another episode of As the Tire Turns podcast. Today I'm joined by John Evankovich, Director of Operations for Sam's Club Tire and Battery Stores. So, John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
One of the things I'm always curious about, right? Sometimes it's a very straight path, but I've interviewed quite a few people who've had lengthy careers in the tire industry, but rarely did somebody say, like, this is going to be my path, where I'm headed. So I'm just curious to know, how did you get into the industry?
I wasn't intentional, I can tell you that. I didn't wake up one morning and say I want to be in the tire business, but I think it started, always been a car guy. I've been around, various automobiles, enjoyed driving, realized at a pretty young age that tires are a pretty significant component in performance, and as a driver, I knew the value of having the right tire for the right application. Later on, as I had various jobs, I worked a couple times in the automobile industry and service centers, things like that. But back in 1990, I walked into a Sam's Club and I was actually doing some shopping and ended up getting hired for a job to work in the tire and battery centers there.
Really?
And that was my entry into the tire world. And worked there for several years, and I've been with the company 35 years now, so almost 35 years. And right now, as the director of operations for the Sam's Tire and Battery Centers, it's come full circle now into being in the industry, and I can tell you it's been quite a wild ride over the years and all the things we've seen the changes. Starting out as a technician, actually out there changing tires, and then eventually having a responsibility for the operations for the organization has been quite an adventure.
Yeah. So was that first store in? I know Bentonville is the homeland for corporate for Walmart, and I'm assuming Sam's as well, and I guess it's referred to as Northwest Arkansas.
Yes.
Right. So it's it was probably started out as a small town, is I'm sure growing in a bigger metropolis now, but. Is that where were you in?
No,
that
it
area?
Actually started pretty close to here in Orlando, Florida.
Really?
Orlando, Florida was the first club I ever worked in, and I've worked in various clubs in Florida, and then now I live in Bentonville, Arkansas.
Right.
And it had opportunity to see a lot of places with the company.
Yeah. Okay. Anywhere exciting that you've traveled, or favorite spot, or is Bentonville home now at this point?
Well, I get to travel pretty much all over the country because we have locations all over. I can't say I have a favorite area. I like it where it's warm, and I'm not a cold weather fan, so I like it where it's warm. I can tell you coming to these meetings, like we were just at our mid-year meeting, is always good to get in touch with other faces in the industry.
Sure. And
to learn a lot. That's a big part of what I enjoy about what I do today.
Sure. Great. Have you ever met a Walton?
Yes. Okay. A few members of the family. Very, the most gracious people that you've ever experienced, and what they do for the community, and actually communities all over the country. Their engagement is incredible. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I remember early days. My grandmother, Sam Walton, did an amazing job. I remember in my youngest years. Right. I'm 51 now. there still being a little bit of a five and dime, but I was kind of past that five and dime, right?
Mm-hmm.
But certainly Kmart, was probably the big, discount retailer
Yeah.
and so on, and then Walmart came on board, and I just remember my grandmother, my dad's side, boy, she shopped Walmart, right?
Yeah.
And just Sam Walton, I think he just resonated with the average American, and I can't tell you that I pay close attention to the Forbes list or whatever, but it's just kind of amazing to see the family members, right?
Yeah.
That have carried on and so on. So that's kind of cool. That
Yeah.
still actively involved, I'm sure, in the
Very much so.
yeah.
Very much so.
That's great. I was wondering. That's what I was curious when I knew we were going to sit down. I was like, I wonder if he's met a Walton, right?
Yeah.
So okay, very cool. So you mentioned we're here in Florida and it's part of the tire industry summer board meeting for the board of directors for the association, and that's really what this podcast really came about, was because of my time as year's president, right?
Yeah.
The past presidents, which you happen to be,
Yeah.
told me, Keith, it goes by very quickly. And so, you've probably seen some changes, in the board and the composition from your first tenure to now coming back on the board. But Mike Bear, I don't know if you saw his episode, but he kind of cornered me and said, "Now, Keith, when you're done, right? You're not going to come back, are you?" And I got to tell you, it's I thought about it, right? Because it's such a good organization, good people, not just obviously the staff, but the people that you meet on it, and I think a very good mission. But maybe if you could kind of talk a little bit, right? You've gone through the ranks and so on. Maybe talk, I guess, two-part question. Talk a little bit about your that time and maybe some of the accomplishments and things that you saw.
Sure.
First.
Yeah, I think, I was aware of the Tire Industry Association back 2010, 2000, in that time frame. I actually was, as leading our business in tire pressure monitoring systems were becoming more prevalent. They were in 2007 in all vehicles, but we were really starting to service a lot of them, and we had a lot of questions. And I ended up calling and talking to Kevin Rowling about servicing and some of the standards out there, and his response was so good and professional that shortly after that I joined as a member of the TIA, and then shortly after that became a board member in 2013. Now, it was interesting at the time because some of the issues are still the same.
Yeah.
We've made progress on many of them, and being the involvement in government affairs and the environmental councils and things like that, those issues continue to, although it's changing, they're the same. So that has been quite an adventure going through that. The people that I've met through here have been outstanding. The one thing I'll say, and you mentioned this, I'd be remiss if I didn't say the TIA staff is just incredible.
Agreed.
They're incredible, and they keep us in line. I put it that way.
Yeah.
The support from the staff is great. They're over the years, though, as a first-time member of the board, learning a little bit about how things work and where you can make the most impact. I think that's one of the learnings I had. Is the first is where can I make the most impact? Because there's so many different avenues you can go on, and it's hard to choose which ones do you want to really focus on. So shortly after that, when I became secretary and worked through the chairs on the executive board, that's when I really realized how everything worked.
Yeah.
I knew then that, as you're experiencing now, the year goes fast as president. It goes really fast.
Very quickly, yeah.
And the initiatives you have might be more than 1 year initiatives. And I knew when I left as past president that I wanted to come back at some point. It took a little bit of time off, and then I started thinking about it, although I was still in touch with the board the whole time. I mean, I would talk to folks on a regular basis. And that's the networking, the questions, and they have a resource, and sometimes just to bounce something off of somebody who's in the industry, maybe have a different perspective. As a large retailer, it's nice to get the voice of a smaller retailer sometime,
Absolutely.
and realize that there are many, many challenges we face that are the same.
Yeah.
Through one of the accomplishments that I just talk about the Electric Vehicle Council. That wasn't a thing when I first joined.
Right.
I don't know if there were any electric vehicles back then when I first joined. But today, we have a council that's focused on how to service them, how to be safe while servicing them, how to keep our technicians safe, proper lifting and techniques for servicing those vehicles, and that's something that I don't think exists anywhere.
Yeah.
And we're filling a need in the industry and keeping people safe, and that's training, education, and safety, the TI emissions. Those are the type of things I view as accomplishments.
Yeah.
Another one I would say, and I don't know if the Tire Industry or Association is recognized enough for this, but their involvement and engagement in government relations.
Well, it's funny. I was going to ask that, right? Because my guess is I don't know, are you in all 50 states, or you may not be in some of the less populated states, but certainly you have nationwide coverage, right? And so it has to be of good importance to you, because, when Roy Four, as we affectionately call him, but Roy Littlefield, the fourth, when he publishes some of the documents on, hey, here's an alert to maybe something that's going on in your state, right? For members that might only operate in one state, it's a very quick read, but right, they're really doing a lot of grassroots efforts, and I'm sure that's valuable to your organization, because of operating in what may not be a challenge in most of the nation. I don't want to pick on California, but it's an easy target, right? Because they seem to have their own rules and regulations, but it impacts you, right? But there could be other states, right, where something's bubbling up, and I always say there's a well-intentioned legislator, right? But one of Tia's roles is, I think, to educate rather than legislate. But,
yes.
But yeah, so your experience as well, kind of when did you get to know that through the executive chairs, right? Going through and see the mission.
Yeah, I think that was when it really hit me.
Yeah.
It was really to be aware of how much work behind the scenes goes into keeping up with the different legislation that's happening all over the country. For me, it's invaluable, because operating nationwide, it's very important to stay on top of what's going on out there, whether that be something that we're trying to drive, like the beneficial use of scrap tires, or it's something we're trying to work with right to repair, the various issues that are out there today, or whether it's working as a group with other large retailers, small retailers on tire registration to improve the method for that. Those things have been I think, so beneficial for the whole industry. Just working with Roy in government relations, and realizing that many of us together have a much louder voice than just one of us.
Absolutely.
And when we go in there and collaborate and come up with a plan, and then go present, and these organizations see that we're together on this, the results are so much more, that they're quicker, and I think there's more impact.
Yeah. It's interesting. Just, and you were talking about your first tenure. I joined the board in 2009, and actually I may have lost to you, because I was not reelected, and it would have been around in 12 or so.
Well, it wasn't intentional.
But then Frida Pratt Boyer from Purcell had asked, and so would you consider running again? And I was off for 2 years, and I joined again and served with you on the board, and happy to serve with you now. But I remember those early years. You're right. TPMS was a huge topic, and here, just going through our committee meetings and so on, and kind of barely mentioned. So it is kind of an ebb and flow, and to your point, EV, right, environmental concerns and so on are certainly big targets. So I know you chair a council that we have, right, and council is can be made up of not only board members but also outside companies, and so you chair the Next Gen Council, right? Which is, well, I'll let you talk a little bit about the mission and the passion and the need for it.
Yeah, I think I'm passionate about that, because when we look at our industry, we've got to look at, who is the next generation of leaders in our industry, who are the next TIA board members, who are things, and it's important to attract that talent. I look in the industry today, and we think about how do we get these younger folks, whether it's just out of high school or in trade schools, to realize that this is an industry that has some tremendous careers that are not just installing a tire or not just running a service center. It can be whether it's in a legal profession or a marketing profession or logistics, or there's so many facets of our industry that I don't think is very well, folks aren't that aware of. And I think that's the big thing, is getting awareness out there to the strength and what a career opportunities can be in our industry. I know I bounce a lot of ideas off of my children as to how do we attract the next generation of future leaders to us. And I can tell you their insight in utilizing social media and things like podcasts and get out in front of folks at an earlier age, I think can be beneficial. It's a challenge today. I know for those folks that are listening to this that had started out in the shops in a hot, sweaty, dirty environment, and they realized that it was still fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed the time I was doing it. I look back and think, gosh, what a great career it's been, and how we can bring those other folks and the new leadership to look at a new perspective in the workforce too. I think is important that we continue to integrate that into our board and in the leadership.
Yeah. I'm in a couple of different groups or boards, and I say millennials, not a 4-letter word, right? Because I think there's a lot of people my age that have this certain perception of millennials, and in some cases they've gotten a bad rap because the workplace has changed, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can't just sit back and every now and then I'll say, geez, I feel like my parents, right? Talking about the how rough life was and this and that, but it's evolution, and I think it's positive. And so the rules are changing a little bit, right? You can still have some of the same core ethics and wants and so on for employees, right? But I think COVID, if one thing it did right positive for us, there were some in our company, I know, roles that we probably would not have considered for remote work prior, but when we were forced to do it, then we realized works out okay. In fact, maybe there's some benefits to it, and I think that's somewhere we score high marks with our employees is to give some flexibility and so on. Obviously, a tire technician, right? In a shop you can't necessarily have that, right. but there's other roles and so on. So I think it's just sometimes I feel like our industry doesn't move quite as quickly as other industries, but the fact of the matter is. We may not be AI, right? Or one of these emerging things, but there's technology everywhere. You go to the SEMA show or TMC, and you see technology and even just repairing vehicles and service. And at some point in time, TPMS was a start, right? But I know they're talking about trying to embed something into the tire. So products are becoming smart, right? Mm-hmm. Products that you wouldn't necessarily have thought anyway.
Yeah, technology is advancing at a tremendous rate, and I can tell you that today, to really survive in the business world, you have to be a student of the business. You have to be engaged, and I can't think of a better way than like through the TIA, the organization, and being able to collaborate with so many different people. It makes it much easier to keep up with what's changing out there. Yeah. I remember the integration of plastic clad wheels and how we had to change our service techniques based on that. My biggest concern is keeping everybody safe, making sure they go home at the end of the day, and sharing those safety practices out there. And one of the things I admire so much about what the Tire Industry Association does is bring those safety practices together and shares them out with the group. And I think that's very powerful in a business.
Sure. Yeah. Anything you'd like to see during your time on the board in the second one. You've probably touched on some of them, but
Yeah, I think right now the biggest things, the Next Gen Council is something I'm very passionate about, and I gotta be honest with you, we don't know all the answers yet, and how do we do that, and how do we get the awareness out there? But that's something I want to continue to work on as we move forward. The government relations area is something that I want to continue to be engaged in, because I think, like I said earlier, the power of more than bringing folks together for a louder voice is, I think, really important. And the last thing is the beneficial use of scrap tires has been on my mind for years, and the fact that we have this commodity that's out there that we're not utilizing to its potential. I think that's something as we develop streams for those that are beneficial use, no matter where it is in manufacturing or however they're used. I think it's important to develop those because we don't want them in landfills or bottom of lakes or things like that.
Right.
We want to make sure they're always disposed of in the right way. And I think those are the things that, and there's many other smaller things that are out there, but those are the three major ones that I think about.
Sure. All right. Starting to wind down here. We're going to quit talking shop. And maybe tell me how do you unwind or when you're not?
Well, yeah. How do I unwind? I don't get as much opportunity to do that as I'd like to, but I can tell you we're boat people. We like to be out in the lake a lot. We spend most of our time out there. Although right now, after the latest storms in Northwest Arkansas, where our boats are a little out of commission right now, but we're working through that. But being around the water. Let's say spending time with the family, as we do a lot, and I know you've met the family, and we're pretty close, and if not entertaining at times.
Yeah.
But that's truly what I enjoy to do.
Yeah. So I met your son Lucas,
yes.
Right? So I know he's got a stage name, right? Because he's an aspiring
he's
rapper,
an aspiring
right?
rapper. Loogie, Loogie is his stage name.
Yeah. So that's.
He's really trying hard to break into the industry and develops all his own content, and it's pretty interesting to see his career grow as well. And again, he's another one of those young folks that has been around the tire industry for a while, and as he meets people, again, he's saying, wow, there's just opportunity everywhere.
Yeah.
That's been interesting to see as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's interesting. So if you can think of something that maybe we don't know about you.
Something that you don't know. I served as a crash dummy for much of my young life. I've wrecked just about every type of vehicle there is.
Oh, wow.
I love to drive, and unfortunately, I don't have as much ability as I do desire. So I've done that. Crashed many. I broke my back in 3 places in a motorcycle accident and various other injuries. And I tend to not do that anymore because I like to stay away from it. Other than that, again, you mentioned I've got my 2 kids, Ryan and Lucas. They couldn't be more different, but it's just watching them grow and seeing what's out there, and having a son who's an aspiring musician, and Ryan who's just a completely different personality, and just being around that, I think it's challenging.
Yeah. Challenging and yet rewarding.
Yeah. Right? Oh, I can't tell you how.
I always say of all my business accomplishments, right? My role as parent, right? Trumps all those, and so it's and I'm a girl dad, right? 3 daughters, but it always amazes me. 3 kids raised in the same house, same parents, same set of rules, and all very, very different, right?
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, to see the differences and to watch them grow up together, and as they mature and how they deal with different things and how close they are, I think is very cool.
Yeah, very cool as well. So, all right, anything that we didn't touch on that maybe you'd want to shout out or?
Well, I think we covered it all. I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate your time as well. And so join us next time for another episode of As the Tire Turns podcast. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of As the Tire Turns podcast. Join us next week when our guest is Tia Treasurer TJ Trum with Pomps Tire.